How to paint a model the right way. Welcome back to the last part in this mini-series on painting our models, what can go wrong and what can go right. So in the last video I talked about painting our model bus, which is one example of a metal model, and there are a number of different ways you could go about it, but I explained that I would talk about the differences between spraying a model with an airbrush and hand painting. And here we are looking at the roof of this bus, the top deck, and this particular section has been sprayed with an airbrush. And although on the camera you can probably see the white lines, that's highlights from the rare bit of sunshine here in the UK pouring through the window. It is actually green all over, and the finish is very good. And so now we'll compare that with the lower half of the model that I painted by hand. And I must stress I've used the same paint product on both of these examples. With the airbrushing, I of course have diluted the product to get it to flow through the airbrush. And on the initial few coats that I put on the lower deck, I used a diluted solution as well. And if you missed earlier parts of this series, the sort of consistency you're aiming for is semi-skim milk really, just so that it flows on nice and easily into the gaps, into the detail, and allows you control of the paint. Now it has to be said that as things stand, these two parts of this model might not look very good, but of course we've only applied the primer and the base colour. And if you've watched my other videos on particularly on model buses, you'll realise that these things only come to life once you apply the final details. And that's true, of course, of model buses, planes, trains, dioramas, all sorts of modelling. And it's only when you put the last few bits on that you really get the feeling that you've created a real world in miniature. And of course, that is really what we're looking for. Now, as well as painting in the conventional sense, I also promised in the last video that I would show a couple of ways of applying paint without using a paintbrush or an airbrush. And this is one example. This particular pen is a Pilot, but it's a silver. And I use this quite a lot, this one and a white one. And I'll show you now how it can be used to apply detail to our window frames on our buses. The most important thing with these types of pens is to give them a good shake before you start, because they do need mixing just like paint out of a tin. Now the most important thing to remember when you're using these pens is to have some spare paper or cardboard to hand. And that's because when you start to depress the nib, you'll get a flow of paint out of the pen that is quite excessive, and that's difficult to control if you're applying fine detail to something like the window frames on the buses or the emergency door handle. And I'll demonstrate that now. So with the top off of our pen, we'll just start with a tiny blob on the cardboard. You have to press the pen down and make sure it's flowing nicely before you actually start to use it on your latest project. So if we move to our latest project, which of course is our bus, we can see that these window frames have been left unpainted, and that's because I want them to be silver. So we'll use our pen and we'll apply some silver now. So we'll just bring our pen nib to our window frame and apply some colour. Now you have to remember, just like all aspects of painting, that 2 or 3 thinner coats works out better than 1 thick coat. And the last thing you want to do is ruin the hard work that you've put into the model so far. So with just 1 coat applied, And I appreciate that silver is probably not the best colour to show on camera, but we're starting to form our window frame. I'll finish this off and we'll see how it looks shortly. So now we've got our window frames in place. Is it perfect? No, not yet. But does that really matter? No. One thing you'll learn about models is that really you want to replicate real life. I don't really like this completely sterile approach that some model makers take, and it's been a theme of my channel, and you want to recreate something that represents the real world. Cocktail sticks. Now when you want to apply very fine detail to a model, there are two options. You can get your very, very finest brush that you possess and hope that the paint lands in the right place, or you can use a cocktail stick. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that right now. So we'll start with this black, it's still green, this hole here on the model bus. And that's this one here. This needs to be black because it's going to represent an access point to the chassis. So I've made sure that my paint is thoroughly mixed. That's important for any painting, whether you're using an acrylic paint such as this one or an enamel. Always take time to make sure that the paint is mixed thoroughly before you start any painting process. And now with my cocktail stick, I'm just going to drop a very small amount of black paint into the area that I want to be black. Now I must apologise, the light is fading a bit, but I'll try and do this as best as I can on camera. And that's it, just one touch. That's good enough for me. Now just one more example of that particular technique. This area here is the indicator of the bus, and of course it's been painted green along with everything else. But what I like to do to make sure that when I apply the orange that it stands out is to paint that area in white before I put the orange on, because orange on dark green paint particularly, I know it doesn't work very well. So again, apologies, the light is fading slightly, but we'll just start to, that was a bit energetic, we'll just start to put some white on here. Now it doesn't have to be perfect because it's just going to form the back colour for the orange that goes on top. And there it is. And that's just enough white paint there so that when I put the orange on top of it, it will appear to be an indicator rather than a green area with orange paint simply on top of it. So in this video, just to recap, we've looked at a few different techniques: painting by hand, airbrushing, and applying fine detail using two different methods. As for painting a model the right way, what is the right way? Well, I use all of them. For me, probably because I'm the age I am, I still like hand painting a model with a brush. But new techniques are always becoming available, and it's always worth exploring and experimenting. Please just don't experiment on your latest product and project if you cannot undo the results if you don't like them. That's it for this series. I hope you've seen the cheap and shameless advert for videos upcoming. They'll be appearing very soon. In these difficult times, please stay safe, and we'll see you again soon on St Blazey Model World. Bye for now.